Welcome back to Angie and Christie Right Now. Today we're honored to welcome an author whose novels are as deeply moving as they are unforgettable. Our guest is the author of The Girls We Sent Away, which is a Southern indie bestseller and the 2025 North Carolina Reads statewide book club pick. She also wrote the heart-wrenching book, The Last Carolina Girl, and her latest release, The Mad Wife, which takes place in the 1950s and blends domestic drama with psychological suspense. And after reading the book, Angie and I know that this combination just couldn't be any better. With a BA in English from Indiana University, this author built a wide-ranging career in storytelling as a freelance writer, editor, and journal publisher before signing with a literary agent in 2021 and quickly securing a 2-book deal with Sourcebooks. Today, she not only writes her own acclaimed fiction, but also helps other writers shape their voices through her teachings at Drexel University's MFA program, and also through her editing services and private workshops. We can't wait to dive into her latest work and explore her passion for storytelling. We are thrilled to welcome Meagan Church to our podcast. Meagan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be talking with you today.
Oh, very nice. Is there anything that you'd like to add from the introduction, the bio?
Yeah, you did such a great job. I think I will just throw in the part that I am a Midwesterner who was transplanted to the South about 10 years ago with my high school sweetheart and our 3 kids and our golden retriever and our 2 cats. And someday I hope to add an otter to the mix. I have this thing for otters, or I keep wondering if when we have like this acre of woods and a river, a little stream close to us, I keep waiting for one to just like randomly show up on my property and adopt me instead, but we'll see how that goes. Maybe someday.
That would be so cool. They look so
They're
cute.
so cute.
I
Too.
know.
They're so curious and they just have so much joy, which sometimes I think I need to pull a little bit from them. So I want one for inspiration is really what I want. So
Totally
Oh,
get
wow.
that. That and
Yeah.
like all the hedgehogs that I see on the internet that look absolutely adorable, or
Oh, I
the
know,
two
they're so
animals, right? Like
yes.
the otters and the hedgehogs. But well, thank you again for coming on, and we can't wait to start talking about The Mad Wife. And Angie and I have been reading it, and we are thrilled with it. But first and foremost, we want to dig deep into your writer career past, and we would like to ask you, how did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I know that beginning
Mhm.
point of when I knew I wanted to be. What happened was it was really in high school that I started honing the craft, and just it was in yearbook class when I would play around with headlines and leads into articles and just had so much fun crafting that. And it was when I graduated high school, I knew I was going to study journalism because I wanted to write in some way. But my second grade teacher, she gave us like the greatest gift ever, that she had kept a packet of our papers from when we were in her second grade class. And when we graduated high school, she gave us those worksheets. And one of them was this questionnaire that we'd filled out about ourselves. And the question in second grade of what do you want to be when you grow up, I put down I wanted to be a writer. And I had always loved writing. I'd always loved storytelling, but I did not remember liking it at that age. I mean, I was a kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s. So of course, things like, marine biologist or, like orca trainer at SeaWorld and stuff like that, those were on my list at some point in time. And I went through a whole bunch of different career possibilities, doctor and all of this. But I kept coming back to writing, but I did not remember until I got that packet as I was graduating high school that I had said it as early as second grade.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
great.
that is so beautiful that she would keep that for every single student that came through
Yes.
her classroom. Oh
Yes,
my
I mean,
gosh.
just an amazing gift to be able to look back on some of the silly things you said and wrote and stuff like that. But then also just, for me, it was that through line of just that realization that, yeah, this is for whatever reason, whether it's a calling or whatever, that it was just that through line of my story. I may have meandered into other possibilities along the way, but really it was always that grounding of going back to wanting to be a writer.
Wow.
I love that. So now you're armed with that possibility. Well, actually, while you're in high school, are you writing things like a journal or short stories or things like that just on your own?
You know, thinking back, I don't know that I wrote a lot on my own. I did write a little bit on my own. There was one short story that I wrote that I gave to my mom, and the title was called Duck Hunting, and it had to do with this older brother who shot his younger sister with a BB gun when they were supposed to be like playing duck hunting, but instead he was hunting his sister. And I have an older brother who thankfully did not have a BB gun. I'm very thankful my parents never gave him that. And my mom read it and was like, "Did your brother do this to you?" And I was like, "No, mom, this is made up. This is fiction." But it's so funny to say this now because my mom still reads my fiction today and tries to find the truth in it, like what was based on real life or identify herself in the characters. And I'm always like, "Mom, do not try to identify yourself in these women I'm writing, please." But you know, a lot of the writing I was doing was simply schoolwork writing. But
Mhm.
what I found was I enjoyed it, even the essays and things like that. I enjoyed it while most of the rest of the class was groaning at the fact that, you know, they had to do these assignments. And so I didn't necessarily do a lot of creative work on my own, but I definitely poured myself into those assignments.
Oh, wow.
That sounds great. And now you go into college in journalism.
I did,
So now
yes.
you're different. It's a different kind of writing for journalism.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you taking creative classes as well at that point?
So what's ironic is I thought I would make the practical choice of, you know, choosing a career path, a major that could lead to a career path, right? Of course. And I was working at my local newspaper while I was in college, and I was not quite seeing those red flags that maybe the newspaper industry is not going to be the most stable moving forward.
Mhm.
And it was in my very first journalism class that my professor returned our first assignment and said, "Some of you think this is creative writing and it's not." And in that moment, I thought, oh no, I am in the wrong class. I am in the wrong major because at that point, I didn't understand the difference in the different types of writing. What I knew that I wanted to do was have fun with it and play around with it and be imaginative and not have to adhere to too many constraints. But within journalism, which I completely value, you need the who, what, when, where, why, and
Mhm.
how to, you know, tell those essential parts of the story. And I just knew immediately with that first assignment that that was not what I wanted to focus on. So I changed my major and ended up with a degree in creative writing. And it was certainly the right fit for me.
You know, it's funny because I did the same thing. I tried journalism in that first class and I realized, no, it's
Uh-huh.
completely
Yes.
different.
Yes.
It really is. So were you writing stories in college? Did you start writing like novels at that time?
So everything was short story at that time because, you know, as an undergrad, that's really all you have time to do. My work at Drexel University right now is basically being a mentor for one of their students, and she is working on a novel. And so we work together over semesters to really help her get her novel project together for her final thesis. And but when you're an undergrad, you don't have the luxury of being able to do a long project drawn out over consecutive semesters. So everything I did was short story. I actually fell in love with flash fiction. So, you know,
Mm.
you're talking a story in fewer than 2,000 words. And I just loved playing around with, you know, what you can reveal or what the subtext can be, or, you know, those curiosity seeds and the character development and stuff in such a short, truncated type of story. And that was my focus. But even though that was all I could do as an undergrad, at least as far as completing assignments was concerned, I always knew my goal was a novel. It's just I needed to learn that art of storytelling in the short form. Before then, I could later give myself time and development to be able to elongate it into the long form of a novel.
I love that. I love that you like flash fiction. It's so cool to be able to pick the 2000 words that are the most important for that
Wow.
story and try to, yeah, like,
And
and
condense it down. It just,
Yes.
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And short stories are still a mystery to me. I'm way too wordy for those. So congratulations on that.
They're a challenge too, but it does teach you how to eh, put a story into the economy of words, like what
Yeah.
you need to say in order to get the story to where you need to be, and
Exactly.
it's a
Yeah.
real skill.
And I am an underwriter. Now, I actually, after college, I thought I'd sit down and write that great American novel and be off with my life as a published author. It took about, 2 decades longer than that. But when I graduated, I had a marriage and a mortgage and I needed a day job. And so I became a copywriter at an advertising agency. And again, that taught me economy of words. While I did not love that job, it still taught me so much about writing. And I still see it in my work today that, my drafts always come in. My initial drafts are maybe 50,000 words. And then I'm trying to stretch, but I'm also trying to be intentional about the stretching. I'm not stretching just for the sake of meeting a word count goal or a reader or publisher expectation. It all has to be there for the sake of the story. But I am just a very short writer. And I think it goes back to the short stories, it goes back to the flash fiction, and definitely the copywriting too.
I love that because we're
Oh,
our 100,000 words,
Yes.
to get it down at the end. And I mean, that's really hard if you're not used to it. And it is something that comes with practice. Like the more you practice at it, the better you get at it. And so, but I love the fact that you're able to tell a story in 50,000 words. And then you can, because your books are so layered, like the Mad Wife was so layered that it felt deep and rich, and it captured me for the length of time that I read it. And then it had sorry, I'm jumping to the book. So let's
it's hard not to.
Sorry.
But I'm interested in knowing, like, even when you were writing the short stories in college or when you were like starting to do your novel, were you always like, would you consider what you write women's fiction? Is that is that always what you wrote, or did you?
Yeah, no, everything I wrote was modern and contemporary. I never considered historical fiction. Okay, let me put it this way. I didn't care about genre, to be honest with you. I was just writing the stories and the characters who came to mind, but they were always in a modern and contemporary context until the idea for my debut novel, The Last Carolina Girl, came about. And I
Wow.
resisted it for a few years because I was like, I'm a nerd, I'm a researcher, I love to just intake information and content, but I felt just a heavy burden of getting everything right. And
Yes.
when you're writing historical, you
Oh,
have
yeah.
to research. So even I had to look up to write that book set in North Carolina in the 1930s. I had to look up things like, did Wonder Bread exist in that time period?
Oh my
Did
gosh.
peanut butter exist? Who had indoor plumbing? Just all of those, let alone the larger idea of eugenics and forced sterilization that I was exploring. But it's just the minutia that intimidated me, because if you get it wrong, your readers will let you
We'll
know.
tell you. That's
Yes,
right.
yes, you will get the emails and the Goodreads reviews and all of those things. And I felt the burden, but the thing is that idea had just latched onto me and wouldn't let go. And what I've really come to realize about my own writing is that I just want to write character-driven stories and especially explore the every woman within story, right? And those who come up against extraordinary extraordinary events within their life, right? And so it's just a woman wanting to live her life, but this extraordinary circumstance interrupts that life. And so whether that is in historical context or modern and contemporary, I go where the character takes me.
Love that. Love, love, love that.
So how does the story come to you? Do you first see the character, or is it the story idea and then the character evolves that way? I mean, how does that work for you?
Yeah, so the way it's worked with these first three is that I've really had the issue that has come to me. So with The Last Carolina Girl, it was the issue of eugenics, that I had a personal connection to that in discovering a great aunt of mine had been sterilized by the state of Indiana when she was 12. She passed away at the age of 92, I believe it was, and we had no idea this had happened to her until after she passed away. And I was just trying to make sense of how this had ever been legal and possible. And as I researched for my own sake, the character of Leah started talking to me. And then it was a similar thing with The Girls We Sent Away, which has to do with a practice of maternity homes and coercion within those facilities that could really manipulate women into signing over their parental rights and giving their babies up for adoption. And as I researched that topic, the character Lorraine started talking to me. And then with the Mad Wife, it was Hysteria, learning the history and the absurdity of that medical diagnosis. And then next thing you know, Lulu pops up. And Lulu popped up in a very immersive way. Writing her story, I know I'm jumping ahead, but writing her story was different in that I felt so much more in her mindset, not just in her mindset, but seeing through her eyes in ways to a depth that I did not experience with the first two.
I love that's how you get in so much into your character. And like, I mean, all the little details, you nailed them. Like, I mean, my parents, when they were first married, that's how they got their china, is by doing those stamps, you know, like
Yeah.
the all the things that you've got from the 1950s is, it
Mhm.
was fantastic. It was great to read. When do you decide that you're actually going to sit there and write a novel for yourself? Like, because your job is writing, and that's hard when you're writing for your job and then you come home and now you're going to write again.
Mhm.
How get right, Angie?
It is time, it's like sometimes, especially when you have kids and family
Mhm.
and all the other stuff that comes through it. So did the idea just start kind of sitting in your mind and you just kind of couldn't get it out and had to put it on paper? Or I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, it took me about 20 years longer to get to this point than what I thought. And I had written two practice novels before my debut novel. One of them was before kids, and I had all the time in the world. I would sit down and I would write about 2,000 words a day, and then I would get on with my day job at the advertising agency. And then kids came along, and that was a massive interruption to my creative flow and energy. But then as they started getting a little bit more independent, then I started work on what eventually became my second practice novel, though of course I did not know it was going to be practice at the time. But with what became The Last Carolina Girl, we had just moved to North Carolina, and my youngest was starting school, and so my day opened up, and I only worked within that advertising agency for about a year, and then I became freelance and took on my own clients, and so I could make my schedule my own. And so that, with her going to school, with all three kids being away at school, then I was able to create my schedule for my clients' work in a way that I could work on my creative work first thing in the morning and then focus on them. But really, it was because that freelance work was a means to an end. It was a way to help pay the bills, but it was never where I wanted to stay. Fiction writing was always the ultimate goal. And it just, that idea, it didn't just nag at me. I felt this drive to tell this story, to reveal this part of history that we have forgotten. And it really was just that drive and that desire that made me focus on it, even though I never knew if I'd get an agent or a book deal, or if anyone other than my mom would read this story. But it was just something I had to do and I had to see through.
I
So
love
at
it.
that time, did you have people read the book? Do you have critique partners?
So the way I have worked typically is that I am an introvert by nature, and I keep things very close to the vest. And so I worked on that book for over a year. I would guess probably 2 years before I opened it to anybody. And one of the first people I opened it to was my former manager at that advertising agency. And he has been a writing mentor of mine in so many ways I could not have predicted. And he saw an early draft. Now, mind you, the first time I handed him a press release, and I was an A student, I was the student who was used to getting papers back with minimal marks on it. And he handed me back my first press release, and it was covered in green ink. He didn't use red, green. I could not believe it. Like, I suddenly felt like this failure. How could I just got an F on this assignment, was how I felt. But he taught me so much, and he taught me not to fear the green ink also. And he taught me the necessity of revision and critique. And so I went to him because I knew I could trust him. And he's a short story writer on the side too. And so he knows story framework and character development. And so he was one of my first critique partners to really give me honest feedback. And then I have a couple of trusted friends that I know I can go to. They're so well read. They're not writers themselves, but they're so well read that they innately know storytelling. And so they are people, and I always say, don't stroke my ego. I need to know what's working and what's not. And thankfully, I found that in them so that I could kind of bounce this story off them before I tried to get an agent.
That is so lucky. That's fantastic. And I think that that's something, what you just said there is something that all writers need, is to not fear the green. I mean, it's hard on the ego sometimes, but you need to hear it if you want to grow.
Yes, absolutely. Because once our books get out into the world, we're going to get those green marks from the Goodreads reviews and Amazon and random people on Instagram and everything. And so, the story starts inside, but then you have to release it into the world. And you have to realize that more than just your eyes are going to be on this story. And you need to see what your blind spots and your shortcomings are to really make this story shine so that, other people other than just yourself are going to want to engage in this.
Agreed.
Well,
Agreed.
especially when your first books go out, and because it's so raw and new, that having someone read it and then coming back with feedback where they're telling you, oh, this didn't work, or you need to change this, and you're like, this is my baby.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Whenever I give edits to a writing client of mine, I always say, feel the feelings. Do not respond to me for a few days because you're going to hate me. You're not going to want to hear this, but feel it all and then read it again, take a few breaths, and then let's chat after that. Yes.
Totally agree. A 3-day no nothing is a great way to start.
Because I also know that's how I respond when my editor returns, notes to me. And so I need that time. My go-to is watching Tick, Tick, Boom. Like if I really get like in this depressed slump of creativity, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to cry and I'm going to watch Tick, Tick, Boom. And then I will roll up my sleeves and get to work and realize, okay, maybe she knows what she's talking about after all. So
that's right. That's
So
right.
when you finish a book, when you finish like the first draft, do you usually let it sit for a while before you go back and start editing, or do you like just edit right away, or you edit as you write? Like, how is your editing process?
yeah, so I do a little bit of both. So as I start a first draft, I typically write forward, and then as I sit down the next day to write the next chapter, I go back and I do a light edit on what I'd written the day before because that's getting me back into the story world and the mindset. I don't like to be too heavy-handed at that point because I'm also, I guess you could call it more of an intuitive writer. I don't like to plot and I like to see where the characters are taking me. So I don't want to do too much heavy-handed editing up front because if I do that, I could just get stuck in that loop of just editing the same thing that's on the page instead of moving the story forward. And so when I get what I feel is a solid first draft done, I like to let it set because I really do believe that we need time away and perspective before we go back in. If things are too fresh, we miss things. And so I have this ability to completely forget what I write sometimes. I'm not sure if this is a good thing or not, but if I give myself time away, then I'm really coming back in almost as my own editor of forgetting I wrote things and being able to see if things don't make sense or, that something got dropped and needs to be better developed and things like that. And it depends on, honestly, deadlines and timeline as to how much breathing room I can give, before I need to dive back in for those revisions. But for me, I write messy drafts and I write a lot of drafts. I couldn't even count the number of drafts because it is a layering process. Angie, you used the word layering before, and that really meant so much to me because to me, that's what my editing process is going back in and doing one layer after another, after another, after another, until it's really as good as I can make it, or I'm up against deadline and it has to go to my editor anyway.
Yeah, it definitely shows.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
100%. Everything was, I love that book, so I'm not going to say anything, but I think we should just dive right in because like I can't wait to talk about that book, starting with the 1950s and just the feeling, like you open that book and you start reading and the 50s just like whoosh, like they envelop you. Like how much research went into that? Like, is it?
But isn't it like it felt so effortless? Like I know
Oh,
you probably
yeah.
did a lot of research to, I mean, just the Jello molds themselves.
Yes.
But but it felt effortless. Like I felt like, yeah, like I was just dropped into the 1950s and yeah, it just like
Thank
no
you.
effort whatsoever put into it. But I could feel all the effort that you could put into
yeah.
it. When you look back and all the details and
Thank
how
you.
did you do
Thank
that?
you. I'm so glad to hear that. So The Girls We Sent Away was the book that I'd written before The Mad Wife, and that is set in the mid 60s. And so I had kind of been in that era, not, things had advanced by 10 years, but I'd kind of been in a bit of that mindset. And so when I went into the 50s, I didn't feel like it wasn't exploring an entirely different era, right? And it was actually, there is a Jello salad mentioned in The Girls We Sent Away that is called the green goop. And I have a dear friend who makes this we give her a hard time about it. She makes this at like holiday gatherings and all of this. And it's like lime Jello with Cool Whip and shredded pineapple. That's the one that gets me. And so I had written that into The Girls We Sent Away, that this one woman, she makes the green goop for everything and nobody else eats it, but she loves this green goop. And it was something about that Jello salad that all of a sudden the thought of exploring Jello salads even more just really exploded within my mind. Because to me, it also represents the artificiality of that post-war era, right? And how they were leaning into these conveniences that were not always great for us in, a variety of ways. And the more I started looking into Jello salads and some of the stuff they would put into these things, my diabetic grandmother used to make red Jello with banana slices, and I loved this. No, I this is the one Jello salad that I actually
Like, great.
yes, but as
Sounds
I
like
but I started finding, so the one that's mentioned in the book is the perfection salad, which the name just perfectly went along with Lulu's story. And I could not have written it better myself, but it has things like radishes and carrots. And I'm like, who is putting vegetables into their
Jello.
gelatin? And then the worst, though, the absolute worst was learning that people put tuna in Jello salads. I mean, no. So I did have to research for myself one of the salads that's included in the book, because Lulu needs to have a failure of her Jello salads. In the start, her salads are perfection. She doesn't like to eat them, but she is the talk of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so, we see in an opening scene a table full of molded foods that she has there for the New Year's Eve party. But later in the book, she has a failure of a salad. And I needed to test it to make sure the way I wrote it was actually accurate. And so it is this, it's referred to in the book as orange vomit at one point, or sunshine vomit, I think is what it was. And it was like orange Jello and cottage cheese and maybe mandarin oranges. I'm
Yeah,
blocking
yeah,
it out
yeah.
of my memory at the moment.
Right.
And she needs it done quickly, and so she puts it in the freezer. And of course, Jello is not going to set up in the
Right.
freezer. And I needed to know that it worked right. Now, I am not an adventurous eater by any means. For some reason, I thought I need to make a video of this, and I'm going to taste it. That was not a good idea. I still can taste the grit and slime of this stuff. Yes,
Oh.
it was
oh
awful.
my
The good news is the way I wrote it was accurate. It all worked for the sake of the story, but I should not have tasted it. I
God.
learned. But just and then beyond the Jello salads were the S&H green stamps that Lulu is kind of
Yes.
obsessed with, that collecting these, because this is also her way to contribute to the family. It is
Mhm.
something she can do to provide
Yeah.
for herself, to build a house and a life that
Yeah.
she wants, that's outside of her husband giving her an allowance to do so. And it really was just spending time reading some books, just watching videos. YouTube was a very weird source of research for me, in that the videos you can find are so wide ranging. I would watch interviews with high schoolers in the 1950s, or just them driving cars around town, or, going to the drive-in. And I would just watch these to kind of get a sense for, what things looked like and how people dressed and stuff. But the most fascinating bit of YouTube research is the fact, and this would not be allowed because of HIPAA laws today, thankfully, is I came across videos of women in their therapist's office basically during therapy sessions of
Wow.
these women who were diagnosed with hysteria or, depression or whatever. And there's one video in particular that I have saved that is this woman who's just smoking cigarette after cigarette and just completely detached, but also trying. You can tell that she's trying to say what she thinks her therapist wants to hear. And
Oh,
so just like seeing her mannerisms and her dress, the way she held herself, the words she said, all of that was just inspiration to put me into the era, but also just the mindset of what a woman in that time period up against those circumstances might have acted like, looked like on the outside, but also, reading between the lines of what was going on the interior as well.
oh yeah, no, I completely you nailed it. Like I mean, even down to the names of the people, the characters, and the Nora, the neighbor who like smokes like an engine and is like
Yes.
all put together, but on the inside, like she's feeling it too, and Hattie
Mhm.
with like the 12 kids who is like happy with everything that's going on, like you can the atmosphere is just so alive, you feel it. Absolutely. It was
I kind
great.
of like that they, even though they did come together, like the friends, the thing I couldn't get their card game where the
Yes.
kids, oh, play cards while the kids nap.
That's right.
Betty Draper from Mad Men
God.
was a big source of,
Yeah.
inspiration for me there because, yeah, it was an era of not only kids should be seen and not heard. In a lot of ways, it was kids shouldn't even be seen, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, no way would we do that today. Just go play cards. You get kids on the same nap schedule so you can go across the street to the neighbor's house and play cards while they're napping, even if they're babies, right?
Right.
And so yeah, it was it was very interesting to get into that mindset and realize how differently we operate as parents, for very good
Mhm.
reasons too.
Yeah, I mean, a particular character when she was really upset about her child wandering off, and everyone thought she was crazy for like being upset that her kid, like she didn't know where her child was.
Right.
That's normal. You would want to know where your child is not wandering.
Right.
Well, like I mean, when I
That
was
was
a kid, my
great.
mom didn't know where I was half the time, just saying.
Drinking out of watering hoses and
Right?
coming home when
Exactly.
the
That's
You're
street
right.
wandering
lights
the
come on.
woods,
That's right.
like, come on, let's go home now.
Exactly. Exactly. But
Yeah.
then you added the layer of mental illness or mental issues.
Mhm.
And I do not want to spoil this because the reveal is so amazing that I'll do everything in my power not to reveal it, and we'll edit it if we do.
We'll
But
edit.
that's right. But we go through um like a mental breakdown really with your main character Lulu. How, like, I mean, you were talking before about how you got into her character. Like, how difficult was that to write for you?
Yeah, it wasn't difficult is
Wow.
really the odd way to say it. Some of what she experienced, there's a moment when she talks about breaking down over a sock, not having a
Yes.
clean sock for her baby, right?
Hmm.
Her firstborn was an infant, and Nora finds her, crying because she doesn't have a clean sock for the baby. And that happened to me when I was still in the hospital. That I was the first time I was alone with my son because my husband had gone home to take care of the dog,
Right.
and he had a poopy diaper that he then got his sock into. And
Oh,
I am trying to recover. I have no baby experience whatsoever. And I open up the drawers to find a clean sock. There isn't one. And I'm just standing there sobbing as my midwife walks in and goes, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And I just held up the sock and I go, "I need a sock." And she just ran out of the room and she came back with a handful of socks and a hug and
Oh.
everything. And so some of that, really was, my own experiences of needing time away and going and locking myself in the closet for a few minutes
Mhm.
of silence. But I also channeled a bit of my mother's own experience that my mom has struggled with anxiety her entire life. And that really heightened after the birth of her firstborn, my brother. And she went through moments of agoraphobia and not being able to leave the house. And she is a relatively early reader, not the earliest of readers, but she struggled to get through it on the first read through because she goes, "Did I tell you these stories?" And I said, "No,
Mhm.
Mom, you didn't, tell me these things." And, she told me some, but not specifically the depths of some
Yeah.
of the stories. And she said, that it was just very accurate to how she was feeling. And it was hard for her to go back and reread it because it brought back the realness of all of it. And so while a portion of it was things that I experienced on my own, some of it was also just stories that I've heard from, my mother or friends or whatever. But when I say writing this was an immersive experience, I cannot overstate that. I mean, it really was feeling as if Lulu in some ways had really taken over my mind, and just
Mm,
I was just really putting her story down for her. And so this book I wrote so fast compared to my first two. And it's a good thing that it came together quickly, because it was also a headspace that it was dangerous for me to spend too much time
mhm.
exploring alone. Especially, there was time over spring break, my husband took the kids to visit family out of town, and I was alone for, I think it was 4 days, working on the book because I was up against deadline. And spending that amount of time alone in Lulu's head was almost too much. And when they came back, I was like, okay, I think this is very good that you're back, because I need to people again. I need to, get out of this headspace.
Mhm.
So it was immersive, but I also know that some of that immersion was simply having heard the stories of so many women over time and what their personal experiences have been.
I mean,
Yeah.
I cried at the like
Oh
that
yeah.
last chapter. Like I
It makes you feel all the feels. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And like we were talking before we started recording, like, I mean, I think as a woman, like we've all been there. We've all had that one moment of like, this is too much. I cannot handle one more thing. That was the last drop. Like you talk about yourself. I had it with a hat, like, I mean, I didn't have a hat for my child and we were outside, like, I think we all have that moment where it's like, I cannot, there's too much. It's
Yeah.
overboard. So it
Mhm.
made you like it brought me right back to those moments every single time. It was, yeah, I
Well,
can see.
and see, and like for us, I mean, we could talk about it. Like now you have the ability to be able to talk
Yes.
about it, but there are things she didn't want to share. She didn't share it with her friends. She didn't want to share it with her husband. And I think some of the things could have been resolved a little bit earlier if she had been able to talk, but she
Yep.
couldn't. She
Yep.
didn't feel comfortable doing that. And that's sad. It's that she didn't have that. So
Right. And not even with her mother either, right? Like you would think that maybe her mother could be a bit of sympathy and support for her, but she was just in a situation of being distanced from everyone around her in some regard. And part of it was just those societal expectations. And as much time as those neighbors and friends spent together playing cards and, just seeing each other across the street and stalking what what their neighbors were doing and everything, but still everything had a veneer to it. And
Mhm.
there might be glimpses of depth and truth, but everybody felt that they needed to play their role. And if nobody was being overly truthful or forthcoming with what their experiences were, then everybody stayed buttoned up instead.
Yeah, you like, I mean, you can read into, like, I mean, when she walks into her house and it's her mother-in-law that decorated the house, like you can almost feel like the mother-in-law had her mother-in-law decorate the house, and now it's my turn to decorate the
Right.
house. And when they're playing cards, yes, they're playing cards so that they can have some, like entertainment, but you're also like they're almost judging what your house looks like, and
Mm,
and
yeah.
like if you're put together in time, or if the card table is set up, or like it's
Yeah.
the whole thing, like, I mean, and that that's how it was, so
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yes, it,
no.
it was definitely an era of control in a lot of
Mhm.
regards, and knowing your place. There was very much a hierarchy to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the whole thing about the men in her life that are
Mhm.
like, I mean, at one point, I'm not going to spoil it, but at one point she gets basically in the kitchen alone with a man who is not nice to her, and she hesitates to tell her husband because he's going to say like, you read into it,
Right.
like that we're going back to that hysteria thing, which,
Right.
yeah, so like, no, absolutely. But I do want to, unless Angie, do you have any other questions? Because I want to go to the very end of the book,
oh,
past,
that's fine.
okay, past the last chapter, where your first question is, do you believe in ghosts? And then
Mhm.
you start talking about Isabel and how you
Mhm.
met her when you went to a writing retreat.
Mhm.
And I want to hear more about this.
Yes. Oh, I love talking about Isabel. I did not like spending a week with Isabel, but I enjoy talking about her now. So it was in the summer as I was writing the story, and my deadline was approaching, and I went away to this writing retreat in Southern Pines, North Carolina at Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. And I had heard that this place was amazing and full of inspiration. And I thought, awesome, this is what I need, just a week away to do nothing but focus on my writing. And this home, this mansion, was built by a North Carolina author in the early 1900s. And he and his wife, they invited in artist F. Scott Fitzgerald was one of his close friends. There are stories of Scott coming to the house drunk and them like getting into fights and like all of this sort of stuff. And the North Carolina Writers Hall of Fame is housed in this house now. And so to be in this literary environment was just incredible. But I didn't necessarily research the place too much before I went. And when I arrived, I met the director who asked me what I was working on. And I told her it was, a woman in the 1950s, potentially losing her mind and, being labeled hysterical. And she said, "Oh, has anybody told you about Isabel?" And I was like, no, who's Isabel? Well, come to find out, Isabel was a woman who had lived for a short time in this house. It was after the owner had passed away and his wife was taking care of. I should mention this isn't just like, what is it? I forget what the square footage is. It's massive. She wasn't just taking care of the house, but she was taking care of the grounds, which was hundreds of acres.
Wow.
And she was running the local newspaper that her husband had left behind. So she called in some help, who was Isabel's husband. And so Isabel, her husband, and their, I believe it was son, moved into the house. And Isabel had, unfortunately, she seems to have suffered from what was labeled hysteria. And at one point, she wrote a note. She left it on a table downstairs. She went upstairs to her dressing room, opened the door to the balcony, and took her life. And there are stories then of these strange occurrences that happen within this house that people attribute to Isabel and or others. We're not sure how many spirits are lurking. But in my time there, the very first night, I was lying in my bed. I was watching a movie on my computer in the dark, and my closet door opened. And I thought, well, whatever. I just didn't latch it tightly. Just let me get out of bed and close it. Now, mind you, I had an older brother who liked to watch scary movies. And so I grew up watching way more scary movies than I should have at ages younger than I should have seen these. But I tried not to think of any of that. I closed the door, put something in front of it, went back to bed. And then I think it was 2 nights after that, I had a horrible time sleeping. I kept hearing noises outside, like people were walking around, opening and closing doors. There was only one other writer there with me that week. She was a poet and she was down the hall, but she wouldn't have been walking past my room. But I just was not sleeping well. And I thought I got to sleep, but then I was awoken by what sounded like a child screaming.
Oh my God.
And that day, one of the staff at the center asked if we could sit down and chat about some things, and she asked how I was doing, how my work was coming along, and how I was sleeping. And I said, not well. Like last night was just tough. And so she starts telling me more Isabel stories.
Oh my gosh.
About just doors opening and closing, strange smells, these loud sounds in the night, area rugs being moved around. One guy was staying there by himself when he heard a party happening on the main floor. So he goes down to the ballroom. He sees shadows happening under the swing door from the kitchen into the dining room, and he hears the music playing. But when he opens that door, there's nobody there. It is darkness and there's no music. And I just keep hearing these stories, right? Then authors, as I'm posting about this on Instagram, some author friends are like, "Oh, did I tell you about when I was there?" And this happened. One dear author friend said her bed moved. She walked out of the room to brush her teeth. She walks back in and her bed is moved. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I have always been fascinated by the idea of ghosts. And there was a haunted cemetery near the house that I grew up in. My dad would tell me ghost stories because he grew up just down the road from where our home was. And this cemetery was literally in the middle of a dirt road. You had to the road wound around it. And there were all of these stories. I would go there with friends and we'd scare ourselves and then we'd go home. But that's the thing, we would go home. Now, in
Right.
this instance, I was staying in this house for
Oh
a
my
full
God.
7 days. And
Oh
I
my
was, especially in the darkness of night, having to come to terms with, do I really believe in ghosts?
God.
And thankfully, Isabel took it easy on me. She did not move my bed. She did not do anything like that. But it was also coming to know her story. And
Mhm.
I read the newspaper article about her death. I saw her
Corners reporter.
corner.
No.
Yes,
No.
yes. And so I got to know more, especially about that part of her life. I don't know a lot about the rest of her life, but in the newspaper article, she was labeled despondent.
Mm.
And she was an college educated woman. She'd gone to Smith, she had a child. And it just felt like while I was there, that there was just more of an urgency to tell the story. Even though Lulu is not Isabel, to
Right.
me, Isabel was this representation of so many women's voices who have experienced whether it's this exactly that happens within Lulu's story or something related to it, that who have suffered in silence of not,
Mhm.
having voices and agency and autonomy and not being believed,
Mhm.
when you're feeling a certain way or this or that, that instead of really getting to the root, it's just a blanket diagnosis of hysteria, whether that's boredom or depression or anxiety or something greater than that as well. And so it was just a very interesting experience to spend a week in this home that has all of these ghost stories. And again, while I don't feel that Isabel was necessarily haunting me in any nefarious sort of way, it really was just being in that place and getting to know a bit of the life story of this woman who had a tragic ending. But I also couldn't help but wonder, the ending we want to see is tragic, but what about the
Yeah.
tragedy that came before that? And what
Yeah.
was she experiencing in her life that took her to that extreme?
Yeah. What do we not know that? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes.
that's nice. Yeah.
That is like goosebump
Mm.
kind
I
of
know.
things.
I
But
love
it's
ghost stories and I love
right.
like
This is a
haunted
good
houses.
one.
So that's perfect. Yeah, yeah. And especially that it influenced the book in some ways as well too.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yes.
kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what I didn't share is that her dressing room was right next door to the room where I was staying.
Oh
And in the
goodness.
room I was staying in was her bedroom with her husband.
Oh
And
goodness.
my daughter, my youngest, I was FaceTiming her. I was giving her all the updates of the ghost stories as I was hearing them unfold over the week. And the last day as I packed up the car, I was ready to leave, and I FaceTimed her and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go in the dressing room. Do you want to see it? And she was like,
Yes.
yes, mom, go in, go all the way in. And I'm like, I'm not walking out of the door. No, I will stay in the doorway
That's
and I will
right.
check the video. I don't want Isabel shutting the door behind me or
I
trapping
know.
me
Can
in
you
here or
imagine?
anything.
You
So
went in and
Nope, not going, not doing that. You can have a picture, but
no,
that's
that'd be
about it.
right.
awful. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing an incredible story, the story of Lulu. I think that's gonna, like, it's one of those stories, one of those books that you read that's gonna stay with me for a very
Mhm.
long time. Like, and thank you for writing that, and thank you for the other books that you write and bringing up the story of the everyday woman, because I feel like that's a very important thing to write, and we thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
wonderful.
So is there anything else that you're working on currently?
Yeah, so I am working on something. It is outside of contract, but it is a story that I just feel compelled to tell. This character started whispering before I was even done with Lulu.
Wow.
And so it is completely different. It's not historical, it's modern and contemporary. And it's asking the question, if a woman in the sandwich generation of her life, of dealing with a father whose health is failing due to Parkinson's, and then having a very angsty teenager, if she is allowed to have a midlife crisis while she is trying to care for and parent both of them, and they don't want to be parented by her, is she really allowed to kind of look within herself and have a moment to herself and maybe have a little bit of a midlife crisis? So it's been fun to write because this, even though it may sound like it has some heaviness to it, which it does, but there's also levity and humor, which, especially coming out of Lulu's story, was a nice switch up. And so I'm having a lot of fun writing it. Actually, right before I jumped on with you, I was writing a chapter where they're having a squirrel funeral. So a lot of animals come into play in this story, including a mystical otter. I had to get an otter in there.
Love it. Love it.
I like
So
the fact that
yes.
it's a mystical otter.
Mystical, yes. Yes. So it is different. I have no clue when my editor hears about this book. She may be like, "Oh, we need to check on Megan. I don't know what's happening right now." But it's a story that I just had to tell, and we will see if anyone acquires it and if it gets to be published and out into the world. But it was a story that the character was speaking to me so much I couldn't ignore. And so I'm like, it's different, but it is what it is, and we're gonna run with it. So
Is there like romance in it? A little bit of romance?
okay, so sort of, but not exact. I do not write romance. I really,
Okay.
really. And so she is married to she's in the midlife of marriage too, right? And so it's the mundanity of marriage. And I like to be very realistic, in my stories with my characters. But when she returns to her Lake Michigan childhood home to help care for her father, it all takes place over a week in the summer at Lake Michigan. And she encounters her high school boyfriend. And then
Oh.
what if questions start to arise? So there is, yeah, for my books, there is a tinge of romance to it. But
Well,
but
as a woman in her midlife,
yes,
I love reading books about women
Yeah.
who are in like midlife,
Yes.
yes.
and just because it's valid. I mean, we don't really get a lot of stories with us in it,
Exactly. So we cover perimenopause in this and all the weird things that happen with our
Okay.
bodies and stuff. And so
Good.
I really, and this one is probably a little bit more auto fiction than what the first three have been. But I agree with you. Like, I'm loving these stories that have like older female protagonists. And I mean older than 20, right? Like even
Right.
Remarkably Bright Creatures or Sandwich and just and what I really like is the idea of, I called it a midlife crisis, but I think we need to like rebrand it as midlife re-examination, right? Like
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be a point of crisis. It's just pausing long enough to say, is this the life I want it to be? Like,
Mhm.
what can I change? What could be different? How could I be happier and more
Yeah.
peaceful and content? And
Yeah,
so,
because sometimes you just don't have a choice, like, I mean,
right.
a lot of people in the sandwich generation are just, this is what you're given and there's no out, so
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or we're so busy that we don't take the time to stop and pause and say, is this what I want?
yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as my second life. Like you have
Mm,
your first half of your life, and now I've started the second half of my life. And do
yes.
you want your first half to be, or your second half to be the same as your first half, or if you
Yeah.
want to do things differently?
Yes.
And
Yeah, exactly. It was at my son's high school graduation party this summer. A mom and I were talking. Her oldest is about to graduate in 2 years, and she leaned over to me, like almost like it was a secret. And she goes, "I got to be honest, I'm ready for my time of
Yeah.
life." Like she was like, "I'm gonna miss my girls when they're out of the house." She's like, "But I'm ready for me." And
Yeah.
that's the thing is I think a lot of women are feeling this way, but we think it's selfish. And so we don't really want to explore it too much. But
Mhm.
when we're launching into a different era of life, then yeah, let's re-examine and let's see. I love that second half. Let's see what that second half looks like.
Yeah, as an empty nester, I can tell you it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
mine are both college age, so yes, it's lovely.
Nice.
But I mean, because I just remember my mom when she went through it, how it was the empty nest syndrome, and for her it was so much harder than like I think maybe it is for me, because maybe it's more acceptable to be able to take care of yourself and do things for
Mhm.
yourself,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
think of yourself having, a future other than just being focused on your kids,
Yes.
I think it's the difference.
Agreed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm primarily on Instagram at mchurchwriter. I have a Blue Sky account. I really don't post there. I do have a Facebook page too, at mchurchwriter, and I will pop on to make some posts, but I don't really engage and interact on Facebook as much anymore. So primarily Instagram. You can also find me more information on my website, which is simply my name, meaganchurch.com, and sign up for my newsletter there.
So everyone, we're going to say goodbye to Meagan Church, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciated the fact that you came on. I had so much fun. And I'm so like kind of giddy about the fact that I had so much fun with this
I
interview.
know.
Yeah, the book can be a little dark and heavy, but I think people are always surprised to find that out about me, is that I'm not the goth girl in real life. And so I mean, no, this really
What?
was
I
so much
finished the book
fun.
yeah, I'm so sorry. And yeah, I finished the book at 8 o'clock and then you came on and it was like, okay, a little bit of fangirl like right now.
Definitely
so
fangirl.
good. It was so
you.
good. And
Thank
you've been
you.
a joy to talk to. Really.
is.
Thank you.
So yeah, definitely everyone. The book comes out on September 30th. Go over, buy the book. You will not regret it. Christy and I, we loved it. We love Meagan, and we're so happy that she came on. If you haven't watched any of our other interviews, definitely, you know what? There are plenty of awesome writers, and so definitely, go on, click on the link at the end, and go over and check out one of our author interviews. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. And we're just going to say bye and thank you again to Meagan Church for coming on. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it.